I was told that everyone who works at the TVA was created by the Timekeepers.
That's ridiculous. They're all variants, just like us.
They don't know that.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my Marvel Loki Episode 3 video. There were so many Easter eggs. They finally revealed what's going on with Sylvie, aka Sylvie Laufey daughter, the Loki variant. So we'll break everything down. I'm doing videos for all the episodes. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get everything. And we're doing a Disney Plus giveaway for memberships. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave all your theories after what happened at the end of the episode. And obviously careful for spoilers for everything that happened during Episode 3 if you haven't seen it yet. I'll start at the beginning of the episode and we'll work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. I'll number these as we go along too, just to stay organized. So starting with the title of the episode was titled Lamentis, which is a reference to the planet that Loki sent them to with that time pad portal device. But Lamentis is also the Latin verb for lamenting something, which is a reference to both of them sort of revealing their backstories and the differences in their upbringing to each other on the train. Like Loki lamenting Frigga's death and remembering his past, and Sylvie lamenting her upbringing and the lack of Frigga, the fact that she didn't have a Frigga to help raise her. At the beginning of the episode, over the recap, they also played more of that theremin music. A lot of you are also asking about that because the theremin instrument is also where the Doctor Who theme song comes from. In the actual brand new version of the theme song that they played over the credits, the green Loki version of the Marvel Studios logo actually sounded kind of like the Doctor Who theme song mixed with the Loki theme song. There's a lot of Doctor Who energy in the series just in general too, with the Timekeepers, the Time Lords, Gallifrey, the big time citadel that they're in here. The actual opening scene, though, is kind of a flashback explaining some of the big twists and reveals from Hunter C20 during Episode 2. There were a couple things that she was shouting that sounded a little confusing, and this was them just answering those questions, and setting up a big reveal about the TVA itself that they made at the end of the episode. The fact that everybody that works at the TVA, from the Hunters, people like Mobius, everyone, does not realize that they're all variants from other timelines. This also explains what's going on with Mobius. There have been so many fan theories about who he really is if he's secretly somebody else, but now they're basically saying that he's just a guy, probably from the 90s, who became a variant that they took. Like, that's probably why he's so obsessed with the 90s and jet skis in particular, because he created a Nexus event during the 90s, became a variant, and that's when they plucked him out. It sounds like the Timekeepers, someone at the TVA is altering their memories so they don't remember. But during Episode 2, when they found Hunter C20, she kept saying, it's real, I want to go home. And we basically find out what that was a reference to in this opening scene. It was Sylvie using her enchantment magic, which she later actually explained how it worked, spinning up an illusion based on a memory from Hunter C20's past when she lived on Earth. It was them inside this restaurant having drinks, pretending to be these old friends, Sylvie trying to get the information out of her. Where are the Timekeepers? How do I find them? How many guards are there? I love Sophia DiMartino's performance as this female version of Loki too. She has the same sense of timing that Tom Hiddleston has, which I think is important for the idea that she is a Loki variant. They both feel like very similar characters. They have similar fighting styles, they have similar witty banter. We'll get to that part too. There was a lot of Homelander energy going on during the episode with the two of them together. They have some real chemistry. And if you have not seen Season 2 of The Boys yet, you are in for something real special. I also love the way they play on the brain freeze joke. Like, do you actually realize what's happening? It's your synapses freezing briefly for a second, and you won't actually be able to recall that memory until they unfreeze. And the whole thing with the time jumps, like it seems like time jumps forward suddenly and it's night all of a sudden, that's just an example of Sylvie when she was talking about what it's like for people who have really strong minds. Like, they're in there with me and sometimes they start to figure out what's going on. And Hunter C20 was supposed to have kind of a strong mind. Like, she starts to figure out what's going on a couple different times and Sylvie has to cycle to another version of the illusion. But then they do reveal what's actually happening, and you're back in the present of what was Episode 2, with her sitting there inside the Rocks cart, just manipulating her mind, trying to find out about the Timekeepers. She tells her about the gold elevators and the doors that we've seen in all the trailers. I actually thought that that was kind of what was going on here based on the last couple of trailers, because I thought this person was Sylvie, and this part of the hallway also seems similar to some of the other trailer footage with Renslayer's character stepping through those doors into this space that looks kind of like an M.C. Escher painting. So I'm assuming because Loki is wearing the same costume here, like he's wearing that same outfit, that we'll actually go past these doors within an episode or two. I don't know if it's from the finale. It feels like it's actually going to happen sooner than that. They're making so many big reveals so much quicker than I would expect them to. And I think we're all expecting some big Wizard of Oz style reveal with the Timekeepers. They were kind of foreshadowing that in episode 1 and episode 2 when Loki's like, wait a minute, you mean I'm going to get to see the Timekeepers? That's all he could talk about, and now that's all that Sylvie can talk about too, making it to the Timekeepers. So wouldn't it be a grand twist if the Timekeepers themselves aren't exactly what we think they are? Then they actually confirmed my theory about what's going on with Sylvie. So I did a big Sylvie explainer video about how basically her whole plan here with the time bombs trying to destroy the sacred timeline, create all these branches, was basically to get the TVA to send all of its hunters, every possible person they could, out to try and stop these Nexus events, erase them before they became permanent, fully branching timelines, but in doing so, leaving the TVA itself extremely undefended, making it much easier for Sylvie to break into the Timekeeper's vault here. And that's basically what she did. This portal that she opens, that Loki then follows her through, is right back into the locker room that they left from earlier in the episode. She finds out that her enchantment magic doesn't work on these guards. Maybe there'll be a bigger reveal for that later on, why it didn't work. She erases some of them with their stun batons, like basically disintegrates them. Loki made the joke about it melting people in episode 2. Like, it's kind of like people are getting melted here. That's another callback to Thor Ragnarok with the melting stick that the Grandmaster used, grossing Thor out like, oh my god, what's happening here? Our Loki grabs his daggers from Hunter B-15's locker where she threw them before the mission started. Then they start fighting back and forth. They start trading insults back and forth and fighting physically. They're supposed to be pretty evenly matched, even though she does acknowledge that Loki's magic is much more powerful than hers later in the episode. Like, I didn't have someone to teach me magic like you did. Loki's super curious about her, but he also kind of wants to stop her because that's the mission. Stop her, stop the variant. Renslayer comes up on them, also makes it seem like she doesn't care what happens to either of them. Like, go ahead, kill Loki, I don't care. Then he portals both of them away, and that's when they wind up on Lamentis 1. They're in the year 2077, so it's the not-too-distant future, but Lamentis is a Marvel reference for a planet in the Kree system that appeared during the Annihilation Conquest storyline. It's a planet where Quasar was, where he found out about the Annihilation wave that was coming, this big apocalyptic event that was going to wipe out all life in the universe. And during the episode, there is a giant apocalyptic event that's happening. Sylvie says that it's actually the worst of all the apocalyptic events that he could have possibly sent them to that were stored on that special time pad. Basically, it's a glorified mining colony in Kree territory, in Kree space, so a lot of the characters, the writing you see on walls, the signage, all the graffiti, that's all Kree writing. So if you're a whiz with the Kree language, let me know in the comments below if you could decode any hidden messages in any of the graffiti or any of the signage. They kind of did something similar during The Mandalorian Season 2 Episode 1 with all these Easter eggs baked into this graffiti that was on this giant wall. This is probably one of my favorite episodes so far, just because of the witty banter and the energy that they give off with each other. They have such good chemistry. Tom Hiddleston and Sophia DiMartino playing versions of Loki, each constantly trying to one-up each other, and then bonding over some of their tragic history. Both of them have very tragic pasts, but at certain points their lives did diverge, like there are different aspects of their upbringings that were very different. The big MacGuffin of the episode, though, is the time pad itself. Like, if we recharge it, we can totally get back to the TVA, we can escape. It kind of seems like all their tech, all the TVA's tech, runs on quantum energy just based on the color coding. The portal energy looks very similar to Iron Man's time pad that all the Avengers left when they were going on their big time heist. I know there are a lot of people that are wondering if the Timekeeper Citadel is inside the quantum realm too. I don't think that it is, but it's actually a pretty decent theory, so if I see more evidence for that, I will do a video about it. The actual quantum city inside the quantum realm is supposed to be completely different in the comics, like it's a completely different form of life that lives down there. It's not like a bunch of regular humans running around. But then Sylvie explains her backstory, and it's actually pretty close to what I explained during my Lady Loki video that I posted a while ago. So I had a link for that down in the description. But the idea was that she was born to Laufey, she was given the Loki name, so she was born a Loki, named Loki, but then later changed her name to Sylvie because she didn't want to be associated with the identity of Loki. Just because as bad as our Loki's upbringing was, very similar to the main version of Loki that died during Infinity War, when Sylvie explains what happened to her when she was growing up, it sounds even worse. So up to their early childhood, their lives were pretty similar, it's just that she was born a woman instead of being born a man. Then at some point in her childhood, her version of Frigga died. They don't explain how she died, just that she did die. And because so much of the good that's inside the Loki character comes from Frigga, like someone who believed in him, taught him magic, this very gentle, caring, motherly figure in his life, Sylvie didn't have that growing up, so it kind of explains why she's so much edgier than our version of Loki. So imagine that Odin for most of his life was actually a pretty terrible dad. Imagine the darkest timeline version of that. That's who Sylvie grew up with. But otherwise, most of their life is fairly similar. So that's why it's so easy for each one of them to sort of peg each other from the start. Like Sylvie calls him out right at the beginning, saying, "You have no idea what you want," when he's sort of calling out her plan to just completely destroy the TVA and the Timekeepers. That also kind of confirmed my theory about what her actual plan was. Basically, kill the Timekeepers and destroy the TVA, burn it to the ground, as Loki said during episode 1, "I'm gonna burn this place to the ground." Well, technically he's not wrong if you're talking about the alternate female version of Loki here. Our Loki is still kind of in that mode where he's thirsty for the throne, like he wants the throne of Asgard so bad. Mobius was joking about that during episode 1 too, saying, "What would happen if you got the throne? Would you become king of space? What would you do if you were king of space?" And he has no answer for him because he hasn't thought it through. Sylvie completely calls him out on that too. "You have no idea what you want." They answer the question, what makes a real Loki? Independence, authority, and style, which I feel like is a callback to the fine Asgardian leather joke from episode 1, rich Corinthian leather, and when they were inside the Rocks cart, him saying, "Well, usually I'd be wearing a suit," when they were trying to find Sylvie for the first time. Sylvie makes a verbal reference to Annihilation when they're walking to the next town, which is yet another Annihilation Conquest storyline reference. I know a lot of people wondering if they're ever going to do Annihilus in the Marvel movies, maybe during some space-based movie at some point. They have a bit of a moment when she tries and fails to enchant him. There are a couple moments like this during the episode too. Like, wait a minute, are they going to kiss? What's going on here? Are they actually going to do the Homelander scene from The Boys season 2? The head writer for Loki, before he actually got the job, actually wrote this story about this time traveler who was a fugitive and the person who was chasing him through time, and they basically wind up falling in love. So post all your jokes about Loki getting it on with himself. I don't actually think that that's going to happen during the series. I don't think that Marvel would take it to that place. Kevin Feige would probably pump the brakes before they got that far. Like, wait a minute, we're not doing Loki as a hentai series. There's the big joke with them both getting their asses handed to them by the settler because they're different plans, neither one of them works. It's all meant to foreshadow them working together in the episode in order to win. Like, neither one of them can do this by themselves, using their own tactics. They both have to work together in order to survive. That's also probably going to be more foreshadowing for what happens later in the season too. Then they work together using both of their abilities to make it past the guards onto the train. I did love the really terrible acting that Loki was doing in the episode. He went full Tropic Thunder in this episode. I'm the dude, playing the dude, pretending to be another dude. But this whole thing with the tickets and the train is meant to be a big Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade reference. Tickets, no tickets. Then even though it's kind of inconsequential to the overarching plot of the entire series, like the big narrative, I love all the new details that they reveal about their characters. Like Loki reveals that he can never sit backwards on a train. Sylvie also, because she's a Loki and they're very similar, says that I can't sit with my back to a door. But she's being just as ridiculous as he is because, as he says, there are doors on both sides, so no matter where she sits, she has her back to a door. So it's just the idea that they're both insufferable as you would expect a Loki to be. When she yells about him having only a fraction of a plan, that's a callback to Guardians of the Galaxy with Peter Quill's 12% of a plan speech. They have their big bonding moment over Frigga in magic just in general, with Loki remembering all these details about his childhood. Like I said, one of the big points where their lives diverged was when her version of Frigga died when she was a child. But the title of the episode, Lamentis, in addition to being the name of the planet that they're on, the big Marvel reference, like I said, it's also the Latin verb for lamenting. So Loki is sort of lamenting the death of Frigga during this scene. They have the joke about them being adopted. Loki says, "Is that a bit of a spoiler for you?" Then she claims that they told her when she was a child. And when Loki says, "Oh, I found out eventually," he's referencing the events of the first Thor movie when he was trying to usurp the throne and disable Odin, forcing him into the Odin sleep. I love the way he brushes over that event pretty quickly. Like, "Oh, I found out eventually." Didn't tell her under what circumstances he found out. When Loki mentions Frigga showing him how to make fireworks over the water, that's obviously a setup for the fireworks scene on the train later, but it's also a reference to the fireworks over her funeral ship from Thor the Dark World. And when he says turning flowers into a frog, that's also a reference to the joke that Thor told about the time that Loki turned him into a frog when they were younger during Thor Ragnarok, which itself was a Frog Thor reference. I love the way that Loki pulls a Thor and gets super drunk, the way you would expect Thor to do. "Madam, I am not drunk. I am full. It's just that I am very, very full." He also makes a joke about the candy that he drops on the floor later. That's a bit of a callback to the joke that Mobius told about there being no candy on Asgard. Like, well, we had grapes, nuts. No wonder you're so bitter. They have this big conversation about love and lovers that they've had in the past, big love interests. Sylvie claims that she does have a lover waiting for her and has been maintaining a quote-unquote metaphorical and literal long-distance relationship because of how far across time she's been jumping during her big plan here. Loki references a male lover like a beau. She doesn't correct him, saying that it's a postman. I'm thinking they're probably going to pay that off before the end of the series. Then when Sylvie asks if Loki has ever had any romances, this is also a big reveal because in the Marvel movies, they haven't really dug too deep into this. But if you're a big Loki fan, especially of real-world Norse mythology, a lot of the conversation they have here too, talking about the lovers that they've had, is accurate to real-world mythology. Sylvie says, have there been any princesses or even a prince in your life before? Loki says, a bit of both. Then says he suspects the same of Sylvie. That's another reference to Loki's gender hopping and fluid sexuality. Like on his TVA file, it says gender, fluid. In real-world Norse mythology, Loki jumps backwards and forth between male and female forms all the time. In fact, if you know Odin's six-legged horse here, that's right out of Norse mythology. But in Norse mythology, Loki changed himself into a horse to mate with another horse and give birth to the six-legged horse. So Loki himself sired the six-legged horse. So when they both talk about having male and female relationships, both of them, that's accurate to real-world mythology. But it's all set up for them just never having found true love. And Loki makes this big metaphor later with a dagger. Like he tries to explain love is a dagger, but ultimately when you try to grasp it, it's not real. Maybe they'll pay that off by the end of the series as well, too. It was super fun watching him get just rip-roaring drunk singing those Asgardian songs. Like, this is a pure Thor moment right here. He even smashes his goblet and says, "Another, just like Thor," during the events of the first Thor film. You also notice that when he gets really drunk, his magic wears off too. Like, he has to focus to keep his enchantment up. And I love some of the small moments that they have here too. Like, for just a hot second, he really wants to eat that candy off the floor. Like, oh, it's terrible to let that go to waste. But once they have their big Indiana Jones Last Crusade moment, like, where are your tickets? Oh, here are tickets right here. And then they erupt into the fight. He even boots one of the guards out the window, just like Indiana Jones did. But you do notice that both of them have very similar fighting techniques, even though he has the twin daggers and Sylvie fights with a really large knife. They both wind up going out the window. Loki breaks the portal device beyond repair, so that's the end of the MacGuffin. And even though you think they hit rock bottom here, I feel like the end of the episode is them truly hitting rock bottom because it's like all hope is lost as the Ark is destroyed. But I do love the way that they joke about being a hedonist. Like Loki says, "I'm a hedonist. I make no apologies for that." Sylvie claims she's way more hedonistic than he is, but she just never lets it get in the way of her mission. She's so focused on taking out the timekeepers. Love a lot of these conversations that they have during the episode. This is some of my favorite stuff from the series so far. Then Loki gets her to start talking about herself more, and she explains how enchantment works, about how she has to create the fantasy illusion using people's memories, and how it works on some people but not as good on others, just depending on how strong their minds are. And it's all set up for the reveal that all the TVA people are variants, and they just don't realize it because the timekeepers are altering their memories somehow, which is just playing into the idea that they're super sinister. And that's what Hunter C20 was talking about when she said, it's real, she wanted to go home. She wants to go back to her version of Earth that the TVA took her from when she was created in a Nexus event doing something. They don't reveal what it was she did to create the Nexus event, only that she had a similar arc to our Loki. Like, she created a Nexus event and they said, hey, we can either disintegrate you or you can work for us. And then at some point they just wiped her mind so she forgot that she was a variant. But the town with the Ark that they travel to actually has this very post-apocalyptic Blade Runner vibe to it, mixed with the design language from, say, like Nowhere or Contraxia, that pleasure planet from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. The director did say that the Blade Runner movie heavily inspired the series in a number of different ways. But like I said, there's Kree language, signage, writing, and graffiti all over these walls, so let me know if you could decode any Easter eggs here for those of you that can read Kree language. Then as the moon finally breaks apart at its equator, it almost kind of looks like a giant Pac-Man face opening up to eat them, which you could think of as another reference to Ego the Living Planet, like a planet with a face, and then also Peter Quill forming himself into a giant Pac-Man during that same movie. Like a giant Pac-Man moon is going to eat this planet. It's actually a pretty great disaster scene, which is everything crashing down around them as they run and dodge things and fight off some of these other guards, these random people. Loki saves Sylvie a number of different times, then uses his magic to repel a giant piece of building People were wondering what was going on here. Like, does Loki have telekinesis? He's not using telekinesis. This is magic that he's using. It's just that he's not giving off any magical energy when it's happening. But it's just another example of him showing you how powerful his magic is. Like, he is very powerful, and several times during the episode, Sylvie kind of acknowledges that. Then just as it seems like they're about to make it to the Ark, it gets destroyed by a giant meteorite. And then some sad guitar music starts playing. It's very on the nose, talking about a dark moon high up in the sky. The song itself is called Dark Sky, and it's a 1959 cover by Gale Storm, which also you could think of as being very on the nose, the name of the singer, because Gale Storm is also what you would call apocalyptic weather, and they're in the middle of an apocalyptic event unfolding on the planet right here. And the song itself is also about love, which is another callback to their conversation about love earlier in the episode. All the music choices on Loki have been amazing so far. The original music, like the theme music they've done, and also the licensed music that they've used. Then if you watch all the credits, you'll actually notice that the credits are different for every single episode. They always change a couple minor things. This time, the big difference in the credits, the new thing, is that you see a bunch of new pictures of Loki and Sylvie together, like snapshots depicting the events of the episode as if someone is watching them and making all these files. There were also a couple characters in the credits that were listed as Corporal Hicks and Private Hudson, which I believe is an Aliens reference. There's a lot of different sci-fi references to movies and television shows baked into the Loki series, just in general. But if you spotted any other big Easter eggs in the episode that I didn't talk about during the video, just write them below in the comments. But what'll happen is I'll do an episode 4 trailer video next, and then I've got some more Rick and Morty that's coming soon. Rick and Morty episodes are also running right now. Michael Waldron, the showrunner on the Loki series, actually came directly from Rick and Morty to do the Loki episodes. So there's this really weird crossover energy between Marvel and Rick and Morty right now. Dan Harmon was joking about Marvel stealing all the writers from his show. Links for those episodes down in the description below too, if you haven't seen my Rick and Morty episodes. While you wait for everything, everyone click here to learn how Loki just set up the events of Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange 2, and click here for all my full Loki episodes. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.